Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Max Heinmarsh, and I'm a Year 11 student at Christ College. My investigative journalism topic this year was investigating school pressure on students and their mental health. Throughout my investigation, I interviewed a parent, Monique Ellis Martin, student Henry Bothaway, and school counsellor Liz Delator. School is meant to prepare young people for the future, but more and more, students are describing their day-to-day experiences as stressful and exhausting. In this investigation, I spoke with a school counsellor, a student, and a parent to find out how school pressure is really affecting students. Henry Bothaway is a Year 11 student at Christ College. Like many students, he says the academic workload becomes intense, especially towards the end of a term.
Probably the work and exams are when they pile up, especially towards sort of the end of terms. You're getting tired, you just want the school term to be over, and then you get hit up with the end of year or end of semester exam or test, and then you've got to try stack up quickly while you're tired, and it ends up taking too long.
And that pressure doesn't stay at school, it follows him home.
I think the pressure affects my day-to-day life by just having, when you're trying to have a break, but you can't because you've got your mind on something that, you shouldn't have to have your mind on.
Henry says he feels supported by his teachers, but that doesn't always solve the problem.
Yeah, I feel pretty supported by my teachers. You can always go ask for help and don't have to worry about, trying to figure everything out by yourself.
The pressure isn't just academic. Henry also mentions sports and his social life.
I felt burnt out a wee bit. School gets pretty pressurising in sport as well. It's never easy to try to juggle everything all at once. And then, everything else going on in your life, just trying to, enjoy everything that you do.
When I asked what he thinks could actually help reduce pressure, Henry pointed out one clear factor: homework.
It's a tough one. I think homework, I don't really think we need too much homework. I don't know, I've felt that without homework I've been able to achieve the same, if not more, due to less pressure.
To understand what's happening behind the scenes, I spoke to Liz Delator, a counsellor at Christ College. She sees school-related stress every day.
I would say most of the boys that I see is around stress and anxiety, and often a part of that is due to school pressure.
While she hasn't seen a major shift in the past couple of years, she says the pressure has grown significantly over the past 5 to 10 years.
I would say probably not in the last few years, but definitely more than 5 years there's been a big shift.
Liz believes it's not just academics causing the overload. Many students are overwhelmed by a combination of school, extracurriculars, and constant connection to social media.
I think there's a lot going on in their lives. There's school and their sport or their co-curricular activities, and there's a lot of socialising. There's a lot of keeping up to date with all their social media.
When students do reach out for help, there are some systems in place.
There are a couple of counsellors here available for any of the boys that are struggling.
But a question that I had to ask was, are schools doing enough overall?
I think they're trying to do the best that they can. Is a big area that needs attention.
Parents are also noticing the effects of school stress, even if it's not always obvious at first. I spoke with Monique Ellis Martin, a parent who says she sometimes sees stress in her child after school.
Sometimes, yes.
She says the signs are usually subtle, like a change in mood or confidence.
They get quiet and they act as though something has upset them, and they kind of think that in their schoolwork they won't do well.
Her main strategy is helping her child build better organisational skills, especially to avoid leaving tasks until the last minute.
When I've questioned them as to why they act that way, it generally comes down to the fact that they might have a project or a test coming up which they've left to the last minute. So I think I have been trying to get them to become more organised, and so they don't leave it to the last minute and they get more time to prepare for it, and then they don't feel as rushed.
And when asked whether schools are putting too much pressure on students today, her answer wasn't simple.
No, I don't, but I do think we need to make sure that students understand how to time manage themselves, as I think nowadays quite a lot of students are trying to do a lot of things at once and they haven't worked out organisational skills. So I think as schools and educators, we need to understand how much kids have got going on and teach them how to be organised and to be resilient.
This investigation shows that school pressure is something almost every student deals with. It affects how they feel, how they perform, and even how they act at home. But sometimes it's not enough. Reducing pressure doesn't mean lowering standards. It could just mean giving students more time, more understanding, and better tools to manage everything they're juggling. If schools and families work together to support students better, we might be able to stop stress from becoming something more serious.
My name is Guy Holmes, and I interviewed Neil Nicholson and Peter Greener about whether New Zealand needs fighter aircraft. In 2001, the Labour Party decided to disband New Zealand's Air Combat Wing as the planes at the time, the A4 Skyhawks, were outdated and not very useful to the country. New Zealand had been offered F-16 fighter jets at a very good price from USA, but the government turned down the offer due to the political situation at the time. I asked them for their thoughts not just on the current state of the New Zealand Air Defence Force, but also on what they think should happen in the future. My first question was, does the Air Defence Force foresee any future need to reintroduce air combat or fast response aircraft? This is what Mr. Nicholson had to say in response.
I suspect no. I think we could go a different role. I would even go, I'd go the whole argument that we probably need to get Predator drones or something like that instead of fast air. They would be more effective and greater surveillance opportunities, and they also can be armed if they needed to be.
Mr. Nicholson said it would be a bad idea to get fast response aircraft, and instead, drones would be a more suitable option. To that same question, this is what Peter said.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But they are going to buy counter unmanned aerial systems, counter drone capabilities, so that ships and the army in particular will have the ability to take down swarms of drones from the enemy.
Peter also said that there would not be fast response aircraft brought back into service, and that instead they will be getting a drone that can be used for surveillance and anti-drone capabilities. From this, we can conclude that jets will not be brought back into the New Zealand Defence Force, and in its place, unmanned drones capable of the same role will take their place, refilling the hole in the Air Defence Force. Yeah, I still had the question of how New Zealand protected its airspace without fighter aircraft due to drones not being able to engage in air-to-air combat. This is what Mr. Nicholson had to say.
My argument would be, do we need to protect our airspace? And at this stage, I would say no. Do we need to show support to other nations when we're involved in peacekeeping and so forth, or whether we're involved in combat operations in Afghanistan? Yep. And we traditionally do that through logistical support via C-130 Hercules, which are now outdated, and our helicopter support units.
Mr. Nicholson said that we don't really need to protect our own airspace, and later said that because we're a small country and located far away from any major conflict zones, that it's unlikely any other air forces would attack us directly. Instead of focusing on defending our airspace, New Zealand helps other countries, and in return, allies like Australia are prepared to support us. He also said that if an enemy fighter ever did enter our airspace, Australia could quickly respond to help us. On the same question, this is what Peter had to say.
And my answer is protecting airspace was never a policy priority.
Yeah.
Okay. With regards to the future of the Air Combat Force, the 1997 National Party White Paper was unequivocal in its support. Taking account of New Zealand's role in the world, it said, we require an air combat capability to deal with surface threats and be capable of providing air support for both ground and naval forces. So, air interdiction, which had been mentioned in the Winnery report, so a fighter fighting a fighter, was really never something that was contemplated.
Peter said that air-to-air combat has never really been considered because it's so unlikely to happen in real life. The next question was whether New Zealand should bring back jets into the Air Force. I specifically mentioned the Gripen, a Swedish-made jet, and this is what Mr. Nicholson said in response.
I think they have, but we just don't. There is no way we can support it. So basically, for every active airframe, so that is one active aircraft that is flying, you need 5 support aircraft of the same style. So if you said one Skyhawk, you'd need 5 other Skyhawks behind it to be used for spares in the case of it breaks down and so forth. That's the problem. It becomes exponential with aircraft, and that's where it becomes really, really expensive.
Yeah, I thought because the Gripen, if we did have the money, I feel like that would be quite good for New Zealand because it's the short takeoff and landing kind of aircraft.
I think that would be ideal, but the reality is, if somebody, why do we need air defence? We could argue we're so far away from anything that we don't need to be defended. If anybody wanted to invade us or anything along those lines, you could sit offshore on a submarine and we wouldn't know anyway.
Mr. Nicholson said that maintaining and operating fighter jets would be far too expensive for New Zealand. He made a good point that for every fighter jet, you need several more to support it, making the overall cost unsustainable. He also explained that because of New Zealand's location, it's unlikely we would ever need such expensive aircraft. Peter agreed and added that the only other fighter jet seriously considered was the F-16. After speaking with the two and reviewing New Zealand's current defence strategy, it's clear that the country has made a conscious decision to move away from traditional fighter jets. While aircraft like the A4 Skyhawk once played a major role in the Royal New Zealand Air Force, changing political priorities, high costs, and New Zealand's geographic isolation have shifted that role towards modern alternatives. Both Mr. Nicholson and Peter Greener agreed that fast jets are no longer practical or necessary for New Zealand. Instead, the focus is now on drones and partnerships with allies such as Australia for air defence coverage. In today's world, where threats are more complex and less about direct air combat, New Zealand has chosen a defence model based on cooperation, cost-effectiveness and new technologies. While some may still dream of fighter jets roaring through Kiwi skies again, the reality is that unmanned systems and international partnerships are shaping the future of New Zealand's air power.
Hello, I'm John T. Ramsden. My investigative journalism course is on the proposed social media ban for under-16s in New Zealand. During my investigation, I interviewed Nick Rayner, Monique Ellis-Martin, and used an interview by David Seymour to see what they thought about the ban and what could happen as a result.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has proposed banning children under 16 years old from using social media in 2026. This is an effort to protect young people from harm such as exposure to violent content and cyberbullying. Children these days are supposedly being influenced by what's happening on social media, and this is changing how they act. For better or for worse, children have been influenced by activities happening on social media, causing New Zealand's government to try and put a stop to this by banning social media in New Zealand for under 16s.
I believe that banning social media from under 16s is not a good idea because it can be used to communicate with their friends, so it gives them a way to stay social.
Children who don't have a SIM card for their phones use social media platforms like Snapchat to communicate, so removing all social media from under 16s' lives could cause parents to be spending more money on SIM cards just for their children to be able to speak to one another. So why are we ditching the free option to cause a negative effect on the parents as well as the children? David Seymour says that the negative effect because of the ban of social media will only be a short term, as children will adapt. If social media was left in children's lives, the negative effect could stay forever, and by banning that, it eliminates the risk, but that risk will only be eliminated for a short term.
You're not actually banning kids from the internet, you're banning kids from social media companies. There's still a million other places on the internet that can have those three problems that I described. And actually, if anything, while social media companies are bad in some ways, at least they're a relatively controlled environment compared with where they can end up in the dark web.
David Seymour then follows on to say,
Look, take it to a select committee. Have the social media companies come and put their side of the story. Have people like Jonathan H. and Johan Hari, world experts, zoom in, or maybe even come here. Hear from your local school principal about what works. Look at some of the technologies that some parents are using to monitor and control their own kids' social media use. By the end of that process, we might find that together as a country, we can have a much smarter solution to this problem than slapping on a ban.
That's what David Seymour had to say. Let's see what a parent and boarding house master had to say.
I think it's a negative effect. I think that teenagers, reflecting on teenagers now and teenagers 15 years ago, the ones 15 years ago, teenagers seemed to be able to connect more with others. They had more empathy, they had more kindness, and I think that bullying was less. Today, a lot of people aren't afraid to say negative things about people online.
There's a lot of bullying online. Being online brings out the worst in people when they interact with each other. There's grotesque content, be it sexual or violent or whatever.
Yes, those are downsides of having social media, but the reality is Luxon's National Party would need the support of 2 coalition partners to pass this ban. Luxon hoped that this would generate support. It's not a political issue, it's a New Zealand issue, he said. Opposition leader Chris Hipkins says, "This is a conversation we need to have as a country. The Australians have been courageous and tackled it. I think New Zealand needs to do the same."
Australia is facing other problems now. Teens have moved their attention to other things. These new distractions have kids risking their lives. Doing wheelies down the street, swerving cars at the last minute, and hanging out of trains moving at high speeds. Is social media such a big deal that we have to ban it to cause even worse damage? Some adults need to step into the future and realise that watching social media on your bed is a lot safer than hanging out of trains.
I think adults are too stuck in the past. They need to realise that technology is the future and that we have to get used to having social media, because otherwise when we're allowed to use it again, it'll become such a big distraction when bigger things are coming into our lives, when we don't want new distractions.
Marcellus Martin says the opposite, but also thinks that social media isn't just causing distractions for us.
I think that teenagers, reflecting on teenagers now and teenagers 15 years ago, the ones 15 years ago, teenagers seemed to be able to connect more with others. They had more empathy, they had more kindness, and I think that bullying was less. Today, a lot of people aren't afraid to say negative things about people online. Teenagers have more of a distorted view of reality because often what could be posted online isn't in fact real, but they believe it's real because they've seen it.
Yes, social media can cause people to have a distorted view on reality, but is that distorted view a bad thing? Most children's distorted view is about getting rich and causing them to get high goals. Is that actually a bad thing? Do adults not want their kids to be aiming big, or do they just not like where the information and motivation is coming from? I think that the side of social media that makes kids dream big is a great thing. People see social media's algorithms for making it perfect for the watcher as a bad thing. They think that it is primarily just for making it hard to people to get off the app. And yes, it does do that. But it also means the watcher is always getting a reminder of what could and is possible for them. That's all the pros and cons of social media and about people's opinions. But what we really should be talking about is the ban on social media for under 16s. To wrap up, these were the pros and cons of the social media ban for under 16s in New Zealand. On one hand, the ban could help protect young people from online harm, reduce screen time, and support their mental health. On the other hand, kids could become unconnected, have lesser goals, and it raises concerns about how kids will entertain themselves when it's gone. It's an issue that affects not only teens, but also families.
How will New Zealand be affected as a whole in result of this ban? Will it be a benefit or a bad policy?